Hello and welcome to the webinar. I am Cassidy Ovula with the Center for Optimizing Rural Health at Texas A&M University. Thank you for joining us. Our topic today is building a multi-generational team in nursing from A to Z. It is my pleasure to moderate this webinar and introduce our esteemed speaker, but before I do, I want to let you know that all participants are set to mute, but we do encourage you to ask questions and type questions into the chat during the presentation. At the end of the presentation, I will be happy to present your question. If you would like to select my name, Cassidy Ovula, from the drop-down menu in chat, then I would be happy to ask your question anonymously and not identify you. Or you can just ask your question during the Q&A. We are recording this webinar and we'll share it on our website and our core YouTube channel with all of our past webinars. And it is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Ms. Cynthia Weston. Ms. Weston is an associate professor at the Texas A&M College of Nursing. Her research interests include cardiovascular disease, health promotion and wellness, innovative pedagogy and family nurse practitioner curriculum, improving access to healthcare in vulnerable populations, patient safety, and interprofessional education. And Dr. Weston has extensive career experience in the care of infants, children, and adults with heart disease, and focuses her research on improvement science and building effective interpersonal teams. She has developed innovative clinical simulation and teaching methods to prepare the next generation of family nurse practitioners to meet the gaps in access to healthcare. And Dr. Weston began her nursing career at St. Luke's Episcopal Health Texas Heart Institute, caring for infants, children, and adults after cardiac surgery and transplantation. She was appointed the Betty Baker Distinguished Professor in Cardiovascular Nursing at Stephen F. Austin State University in 1996. In 2007, she established nurse practitioner services for the cardiovascular service line at Kingwood Medical Center, achieving 100% compliance in CMS core measures throughout her tenure. In 2011, she received an academic appointment in the Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio School of Medicine as the nurse practitioner for congenital heart program and single ventricle clinic. Dr. Weston received her Bachelor of Science in Nursing from the University of Texas Medical Branch and Master of Science in Nursing and Doctor of Nurse Practitioner from the University of Texas Health Science Center in 2014. So welcome, Dr. Weston. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Cassidy, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this topic. For the first time in American history, we have 5 generations of nurses and healthcare providers in the workplace at the same time. And 70% of healthcare organizations say that leading multi-generational workforces is important, but only 10% feel equipped to do so and to address it. So I think this is a real timely topic because of the generational opportunities that we have in the current healthcare workforce. Imagine a garden of only a single plant or flower that is isolated. They're beautiful, it's effective, it's enjoyable, but more beauty is noted when the garden is mixed and everything is working together in colors. So I want this to be interactive. I hope that you will engage either in chat or through some polling questions, and Cassidy's going to help me. I have an initial polling question to set out for you, but I'd like to hear from you. You're in this presentation today because clearly it's a topic of interest. So what do you see as the greatest issue in the multi-generational nursing and healthcare workforce? And Cassidy, if you can pop up that poll for you to answer, you can literally select, it looks like it, I don't know if we can relaunch it. It looks like it didn't give the chance for anyone to select. I don't know if that's possible, Cassidy, to try it one more time, but if not, you can type it into the chat. Do you see it as communication, negative stereotypes, employee expectations, or team cohesiveness? What do you see as the greatest issue? And you can just type that into chat.
And Cindy, I apologize. On my end, it's showing polling options and then view results. So I'm not sure what's going on. But yeah, I think using chat. Oh, I see a few people using the poll.
Okay, okay. Yeah, uh, all of those things. The workforce today is more diverse in age than ever before, and it presents really unique challenges with leadership. In days gone by, there were only two age groups that were represented in the workplace, and they were kind of the long-serving, dyed-in-the-wool old-timers, or those ambitious newcomers. And different generations struggle to understand one another's values and working styles. Working together and sharing power is problematic right now in a multi-generational workforce. And as more people are delaying their retirement, and younger generations sometimes feel that their opportunities for career advancement are restricted, and intergenerational conflict can arise in the workplace. A 2011 study actually found that intergenerational cohesion is one of those top three workplace risks. So the objectives of this talk is to first, I'll briefly define what the generational cohort characteristics are, and then the expectations amongst each generation for work-life balance and those potential negative outcomes of that, and then sort of stimulate some thought on team strategies for positive outcomes and resources for building teams and organizational efficiency. We have to understand the generations in the context of the current healthcare environment, and never before has healthcare been so complex. Our systems have been tested through the COVID-19 pandemic, but even before that, patients are going to the hospital sicker and leaving quicker. Technology is rapidly changing on how we care for patients, and healthcare workers here very commonly do more with less. And this expectation has become the norm rather than the exception. And then adding to that dynamic is this multifaceted work environment that is cross-pollinated with converging multi-generational nurses and healthcare workforce. This workforce is encompassed of several generations that have to learn to work together, form teams, and then recognize that inherent diversity to deliver effective healthcare. So let's see if this will work, but I have another polling question for you if it'll work. Otherwise, you can type in the chat. How did you learn to take blood pressures, and or what was being used to take blood pressures when you entered the healthcare environment? You can say that mercury, sphygmomanometer, the aneroid are digital, or maybe you've used a little bit of both or all. And it looks like pretty much a few of you, I see some, the majority have learned on the aneroid, and some people have used everything. And I can completely relate to that. It's important to understand the generational cohorts, and maybe how you learn to take blood pressures defines your generational cohort. But a generational cohort's grouped according to the year of their birth, the events that occurred during the lifetime, their life events such as wars, technological advancements, economic conditions. And this multi-generational workforce contains a diversity of attitudes, beliefs, their work habits, and all of that should be taken into consideration when building relationships with that team. So we'll start with the oldest generation that is really phasing out of the workforce right now. They're called the traditional generation, or the veterans. Some people also refer to them as the silent generation. They were born between 1928 and 1944, and they're known for their self-sacrifice, their respect for authority, their strong work ethic with work as its own reward. The youngest of them are now like 76 to 78, and so most of them are retired, but not all. And unfortunately, the pandemic actually took out some of these healthcare worker colleagues that were still working in this age group. It's really true. There was a report, and maybe you've heard of it, Betty Greer Gallagher. She was a registered nurse who had worked for 50 years, night shift in an emergency department in a community-based hospital in Alabama, and she refused to retire. Everyone knew her as Miss Betty, but in January, she contracted COVID-19 and succumbed to that illness. This traditional generation is leaving a legacy in nursing because they were all about structure. They were all about following the rules, and they were all about what is the policy, what is the procedure. They don't necessarily embrace change, although they experienced a lot of change in healthcare firsthand. And if for those who are still in the workforce, they've mostly scaled back to either less physically demanding positions, or they've opted for part-time or per diem type work. So they're only a couple of percent of the nursing workforce represents this generation, and they're the mainstay when they are still in the workforce. The biggest generation for most of history was the boomers, who came shortly after the veteran generation. They were born between 1945 and 1960. This generation is characterized by hard work. You can thank this generation for the term workaholic. As a generational cohort, they appreciate, they thrive on competition, and they take pride in how hard they work, how many hours they worked. They would work 60, 80 hours a week because they believed hard work paved the way for their own path to success. As a generational cohort, they love effective communication, but not necessarily through electronic means. The youngest of this generation are in their early 60s. And at this point, they're thinking about retirement if they haven't retired already. But what we know about this generation is that they worked longer than prior generations. They stayed in the workforce. Part of that is because of nursing shortage, and the opportunities are still there. Part of that is some of them need it for the retirement years. Nurses that are age 65 and older, and this is the newest data that just came out in 2020, make up 19% of the current RN workforce are over the age of 65. And that's up from 15% in 2017, and it was only 4% in 2013. So the boomers are staying in the workforce longer, and they add great value in their experience, their history. They have truly witnessed the evolution of healthcare. They were surveyed several years ago, and 65% of them plan to work past the age of 65. That's indeed what we've seen. But now today, about 10,000 baby boomers are retiring each day. And we know that this is looming for another nursing shortage, which many of you may already be feeling. They serve best when they're in roles of mentorship. They can offer great mentorship to the younger generation of nurses. And for them, they appreciate a coaching style of feedback. They thrive on specific goals and deadlines. And because of their hardworking nature, sometimes they feel resentful of the younger nurses who are less patient about paying their dues to move up in the ranks. But these younger generations are able to move up in the ranks because they're much more technology savvy. So as an organization, if you give boomers credit and compensation for their hard work, they're going to be very loyal to you. Generation X is known as the latchkey generation. They were born between 61 and 1980. They were raised by the workaholic traditionalist and boomers. And so Gen Xers learned to fend for themselves and become very independent early on in their lives. They're the smallest generation, kind of sandwiched in between the boomers and now the really big millennials. And they're now approaching their 40s and 50s. This was the generation where divorce became commonplace. So they learned to manage on their own, and they crave autonomy, and they do not like to be micromanaged. Gen Xers are very much team players, and they're not intimidated by technology one single bit. This is the first generation to start considering work-life balance and to weigh in their career and position in the workplace, because they witness the detrimental impact of that workaholic parent or really any aholic, on the family itself. So having gone through economic downturns and downsizing, they're kind of skeptical of authority figures. But they're the ones that have removed the notion that you should stick with one employer for your entire career or for the long haul, because they feel that work-life balance is much more important than a higher salary. As a cohort, they're very creative and innovative. In fact, 55% of all startup founders were Gen Xers, and now they outnumber the baby boomers in the workforce. As nurses, they appreciate immediate feedback, and they really want flexibility in their scheduling and their work arrangements. So as a healthcare leader, to extend opportunities for professional growth and development will keep them happy, as well as that opportunity for advancement and a work-life balance. They'll be very productive. The millennials. Well, the millennials were born between 1981 and 2000. And I give these age ranges, but know that the age range is very diverse out there and what defines any of these generational cohorts, give or take about 5 years or so. But the millennials are generally those from the 80s to 2000. And this generation is now in their 20s and 30s, and they've taken a lot of heat. They've been called snowflakes and lazy, entitled. This is the generation that grew up where everybody got the ribbon, everybody got the trophy, and they never knew a time when technology was not present. So they are very tech savvy. Their boomer and Gen X parents went all out for them, and they regularly earned recognition and praise for their accomplishments. They've always been taught that their input has great value, and because of that, it makes them very strong collaborators in the workplace. They're incredibly pragmatic, they're hopeful, they're positive, they're very determined, they're very civic-minded, and they're a very giving and volunteering type generation. They think they're going to change the world. And they also, though, have the greatest debt of any generation in history. So to the boomer, it appears like entitlement when they hire on and request a higher pay to start with as a threshold hire, but it's often because they're requesting that higher pay because they're saddled with this mountain of debt. They are idealistic, but by 2025, so in just a few years, they're going to be the most represented generation in the workforce. And another interesting characteristic about this generation is that 15% of those up to age 35 are still living with their parents. They were raised by the helicopter parents. They appreciate family, they appreciate work-life balance, but they're also the ones that will show up on their first day of work telling you that they need this week off in the next couple of months because a friend's getting married, or they need a week off because there's a pre-planned family or event or vacation. A boomer would have never considered asking for any of that on their first day of work. They crave mentorship. Employers do best when they get to know them personally, though, because they are very motivated by results. As a generational cohort, they respond very well to dashboards that show metrics and progress, and they can get on board when they can see that results are happening. The best thing you can do is be very flexible with their schedule and their work assignments. Try to align them with their interest and provide them with immediate feedback. Millennials thrive most when they're kept engaged with new projects and when they can find meaning and purpose in their work. And if it's not there, then they tend to job hop in that quest for personal fulfillment and personal growth. You probably also noticed with millennials that there's this lack of interpersonal communication skills. They grew up text messaging and with social media. So that's actually, though, a trait that's countered by their ability to multitask and adapt to new technology with ease. And finally, the Generation Zs. Those were born after 2001. This is the Apple generation. The first iPod came out in October of 2001. The first iPod or iPhone actually by 2007. So they literally grew up with a device in their hand. And most of them had smartphones by the time they reached middle school, if not sooner. They have always had information at their fingertips. They read less, they sleep less, they're very close to their families, and they never knew a world in which terrorism did not exist. They were exposed at early ages to natural disasters, and they are our very newest nurses who are entering the workforce. And unlike millennials who were raised during the Great Recession, the Generation Zs were raised in America during a time of our strongest economies and record unemployment. They really never knew economic struggle as a generational cohort until COVID-19 hit. And in March of 2020, the Pew Research Center did a survey that reported 50% of those oldest Gen Zers had either lost their job, or someone in their household had lost their job, or had a cut in pay because of the pandemic. And this was significantly higher than millennials, who came in at 40%, Gen X's 36%, boomers at 25%. So they have seen this as a result of the pandemic. And they crave authority and leadership involvement in them. They crave direction. They crave mentorship. And the other thing they really want is formal orientations and training and onboarding processes when they start a new position at your hospital. 84% of Gen Zs expect their employer to provide them with a formal training. And what does this mean for nursing? Nurse residency programs. New nurse entering into a residency, 84% of them are expecting some type of formal training and onboarding process. 40% of Gen Zs want a boss to interact with them daily, or at least or several times a day. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be face-to-face. They're not face-to-face communicators, but they want that interaction with their leadership. So, you know, we prepare for hurricanes and we prepare for life events like the birth of a child or retirement. We need to prepare in the workplace for the Generation Zs, because they are coming and they are starting to enter. And these are some things as a cohort that it appears that they need and like. I really like this visual depiction because it shows the difference of numbers between the generations. We knew the baby boomers were a huge group, but the millennials are even bigger. And guess what? The Generation Zs are even larger than them, all sandwiched in those much smaller Gen Xers. So here's our next polling question. Thank you, Cassidy, for your help. Which generation are you? And we'll see if it'll pop up as a poll. There you go. And I think you can just select it right on your screen. And this is looking very, very typical of very typical of what we would expect in the workplace. So thank you for that. Mostly Gen X, which is what we mostly have in the workforce right now. Thanks. So full disclosure, I myself am a Gen X. My husband is a boomer. Our sons are millennials, and my granddaughter is a Gen Z, or she may be whatever the next generation is that's coming up behind the Zs. But I was raised by traditionals, and I work with all generations. I teach across all generations, and I certainly learn from all generations. Nursing as a workforce is changing, and this is the most recent data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. Most recent data, it shows the average salary of the registered nurse at $75,000, with about $76,000 for those who are working in hospitals, and 60% of all registered nurses are working in a hospital setting. The typical typical entry is now the Bachelor of Science in Nursing. 65% of all practicing registered nurses have their BSN, and there's over 4 million in the United States. And the outlook is good. There's at least 7% job growth, and most of that is because of those retiring baby boomers. And we know that there is a looming nursing shortage, and up into 100,000 positions, because they're adding approximately 200,000 positions every year. And keep in mind, the generations behind the Gen X, which is the 40 to 50-year-olds right now, are much, much larger generations. So that's going to create additional need for access in healthcare for those generations as they age. So also 2/3 of registered nurses are working full-time, and look at that average age. You know, in the past, nurses retired or really started cutting back their hours between the ages of 52 and 58, but that is no longer the case. As you saw earlier with the boomers, they're staying in the workforce, and so the nursing population is aging. 81% report and identify as white and Caucasian. So that's not representative of the demographics of the United States. But the good news is that registered nurses aged 20 to 40 have the greatest diversity of any nursing workforce entering and on the horizon. So diversity in the nursing profession is improving and will improve over the next 10 to 20 years. There's now 9.4% that are male, and that's up from 2017. And more than 20%, or 1 in 5 of all nurses, are planning to retire in the next 5 years. And this was the most recent data of the National Council of State Boards of Nursing State of Nursing Workforce study that was just published this very year. So what does this all mean? Generations aren't part of the conversation. Generations are the conversation. And the most important piece as a rural healthcare provider is to understand engagement. Engaged employees invest in their work and in the organization. They're enthusiastic. They value organizational success, and their work becomes a part of their identity. A study that was published in 2019 surveyed veterans, boomers, Gen Xers, and millennial nurses on work engagement. Now, of that population, only 2% were veterans, 49% boomers, 33% Gen X, and 16% millennials. Most of them worked in hospitals as staff RNs, and they were asked 9 questions on a very reliable tool. Had about 0.92 internal consistency. And these questions were things on engagement like, at work, I feel like I'm bursting with energy, or I'm enthusiastic about my job. My job inspires me. I'm immersed in my work. And so the goal was to get at a total work engagement score. And fortunately, what this demonstrated, the results were a decline over the newer generations in work engagement. So this is very concerning at multiple levels, because but it's also something you probably have identified in your organizations. Veterans and baby boomers are retiring from nursing, and Gen X and millennial nurses are becoming the dominant nursing workforce. What this demonstrates is that healthcare organizations must develop multi-generational work engagement strategies, including creating a culture of employee engagement that offers employees meaning, appreciation, influence, connection, so that they stay engaged as healthcare providers. Well, next is communication. These generations have very different preferred methods of communication. The silents and boomers, they tend to like one-on-one, or telephone, or handwritten communication, whereas Gen X and millennials tend to like emails and text. Gen Z generally performs collaboration and interaction through social media. So generations differ to the degree of formality that they use too. Older team members will be more formal in their communication, whereas younger colleagues are more likely to use colloquialisms or abbreviations or emojis, those small digital images and icons, to express their ideas or their emotions. And although emojis might be more suited for personal or less important messages, they tend to be used by these generations across all types of even serious or important messages. So sticking strictly to your own favored means of style and communication will alienate and can alienate others. So although it might not feel natural, try to tailor your communication to suit the recipient whenever it's appropriate. And next is retention. You know, as an organization, failing to recognize generational differences, traits, and values and preferences is unwise, and it can lead to a high nurse turnover. In the midst of the nursing shortage, it's estimated to cost $82,000 to $88,000 to replace a single full-time registered nurse. So turnover can have a significant impact on a healthcare organization, and increasing satisfaction in the workforce can result in cost savings at the very least. And finally, the effective teams is important in understanding multi-generational nursing. Understanding the different generational groups may allow nurse leaders, managers to consider what drives and motivates or what hinders nurses from different generations. Recruiting and retaining a workforce increasingly made up of nurses from many different generational groups is a challenge, but to tackle it is important because we are living with multi-generational healthcare teams. So here's your next polling question, and I'll let Cassidy throw this polling question up there. What do you think is the top need of any generation? Is it A, an opportunity to advance within the organization, or B, a better work-life balance, or C, better pay, benefits, D, respect, recognition, E, access to opportunities for learning and development? This is, what do you think? What do you think? There's no wrong answer here. What do you think? Hearing about the different generations, but knowing across all generations. That's really good. Good, good, good. I see a lot of diversity. Yeah. In your answers. So respect and recognition. And I apologize. That's perfect. Better work-life balance. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's really true. These are all top needs in nursing. As mentioned, each generational group is different. They each bring different views on authority, their own set of values, their orientation to the world. But the positive slant is that they all bring something new, unique, and important to the nursing workforce. And given that nursing and healthcare industry is team-driven, with a mix of skills, talents, views, and perspectives, we need everyone and everyone's view for high functioning interdisciplinary teams. You know, Gen X's and millennials want to play a part. They want to take the lead, and they want to make a difference. The boomers were all about just hard work and giving to that organization and staying in that organization. Gen X and millennials, they want to make sure that they're making a difference. So organizations hoping to retain the newer generations need to be flexible and approachable. And employers can better support a multi-generational workforce by offering opportunities for training, coaching, and motivation for all generational groups. You know, in the next few years, millennials, 2025, they're going to be the largest workforce in nursing. And since nursing is predominantly female, these millennial women are still going to be bearing the majority of caregiving responsibilities for their children. And there'll be a sandwich generation, just like the Gen Xers, where they're taking care of ill and older family members. So it's very vital that as an organization, you consider how you can accommodate life-work balance needs. And respect respect was the number one that you selected, it is crucial, because incivility in the workplace, if left unchecked, is a culture killer. It erodes organizational morale and can actually create unsafe patient care environments. Generational differences, if left misunderstood, have the potential to damage the workforce, increase that staff turnover, and result in substandard patient care, which results in poor outcomes and higher costs to the organization. So respect should reign across all generations. And recognition. Traditionals want that handwritten note and plaque. Boomers want public recognition. Gen Xers want PTO. Millennials prefer kind of that personal feedback and flexibility. And Gen Z, they want some instant feedback, that instant kudo, the like. So maybe we need to consider moving beyond generalizations and siloed groups or stereotypes to this concept of perennial. It was first articulated by Gina Pell from UC Berkeley. She actually just posted a blog on this concept of perennial, and within 2 weeks it went viral and was actually translated into like 8 different languages. But it captures the increasing importance of moving beyond these broad demographic categories to really understand people, individuals, on a meaningful level. As Pell puts it, perennials describe this ever-blooming group of people, all ages, stripes, types, who transcend stereotypes and make connections with each other and the world around them. These are people of all ages who continue to push up against the growing edge, always relevant and not defined by their generation. Perennials are people who get involved and stay curious, who invest in others, mentor others. They're passionate, compassionate. They're creative, confident, collaborative. They're global-minded risk takers. These are individuals who comprise inclusiveness and enduring that hustling mindset. So ways that you as an individual can be a perennial is look for opportunities to speak positively about a nurse colleague or coworker that's across generations. Speak positively about them to patients, to others in small groups, to large groups within your organization. And listen, really listen to others, even others of diverging viewpoints. Give at least 1 minute before interrupting someone so you can validate what their experience is. And also, as an organization, be willing to have those hard conversations. The key thing is show others that they're valued. Another key point is something that Michael Strasser speaks of called generational agnosticism. Basically, it's removing stereotypes, because culture eats strategy for lunch. I know you've heard that. The culture you create within your organization is the most important thing. So establish a culture where nurses can buy into the mission and vision and be a part of something bigger than themselves. This is so important in rural health, because you're caring for the people that you see at the grocery store, at your child's baseball game, who go to your church. And so casting a vision that rural healthcare is taking care of your family, because it's taking care of your community. So this is crucial with the upcoming younger generations to know that what they're doing makes a difference. And don't cater to a certain age group, but value each individual person and get to know them individually and not as a generation, even if they're very different in mindset than you are. And also, finally, develop clarity in your communication. Be very clear with your expectations and let those expectations be consistent amongst all. Studies have demonstrated that teamwork leads to greater job satisfaction with present occupation and a current position. A study that was completed way back in 2000 showed a direct link between effective teamwork and patient safety. And we've known this for years, that high functioning interprofessional teams have the highest patient safety. So that's what you're wanting to create, is a strong multi-generational team. Millennials are most likely to view text messaging with associated abbreviations as their preferred method of communication. And of course, baby boomers are going to want that face-to-face. Understand the differences in communication so that you can improve communication. Meetings that are being held once a month might be an option. Communication by email to a group might be very efficient and effective, and Gen Xers will love the efficiency. Using a mailroom bulletin board to communicate might be a preferred method for some. So if you can incorporate a variety of methods of communication within your organization, you'll demonstrate respect for all. These multiple channels will improve effective communication. Millennials and Gen X team members need to work where they're appreciated, and they might not understand the baby boomers' need for competition and group work because they all got the trophy. The baby boomers only got the trophy if they won or if they were in first. So they don't respond as much to the competition as an older generation might. Baby boomers can admire that self-sufficiency and technological savviness of that younger generation. And building trust within a team is crucial. Trust can be strengthened when there's consistency amongst feedback, but it's also important for a team to realize that it only takes one incidence of like a substandard performance to instill a feeling of mistrust, and mistrust leads to distrust and ultimately to a dysfunctional team. So consistency in a team and addressing any conflicts as they arise quickly will help strengthen and build that team. So I'm closing with some tools for a toolkit, and these are team building exercises. And to some of you, they may seem a little hokey, but it's a toolkit. So you might not use all these tools in the toolkit, but ways to get groups talking is one of the effective ways to build teams. So you can have nurses share a time when they were fully engaged in their workplace and what was something that they did that made a difference. Just doing a few moments at the beginning of a staff meeting where you have this type of sharing can really build cohesiveness. And another way is those 3 C's: contribution. Share one contribution in the past month where they made a difference. Craft is asking someone to talk about how they delivered a high quality care or they developed a new skill. Community is establishing that culture where there's connectiveness. The younger generations crave that. Nurses have always been great with potlucks, but also unit celebrations for weddings and baby showers. All of those things make a difference in community. There's ways to address conflict by removing barriers. And this is just one suggestion. You kind of pass out these sticky notes and divide people in teams, and you have them write down every single obstacle right now in their unit that's inhibiting patient care, or maybe it's timely flow through of patients on a particular unit. And so you get this sort of group think going on where everybody list every obstacle they can think of. And then you group those into what are the quick fixes, what are breakthroughs that can happen, they're fixable, but they might take some time. And then what are some unmovables? What are some unpreventable obstacles? And maybe those you look at as a group, how you can do a workaround. These are ways to build consensus. And then you can do these old-fashioned report cards, A, B, C, D, F, and have some titles. I mean, literally on cardstock report card, and pass it out to your nurses and have them rate, what is the communication like in our organization? Do you feel connected? Do you feel valued? Do you have an avenue for professional growth? Really quick, and it keeps your finger on the pulse of the organization. There's a lot of other team building exercises. You can get generations talking about what was their car that they drove during nursing school, or you can do this mind field where you blindfold a teammate and have another teammate coach them through an obstacle course or to find a particular item. And then conflict resolution strategy is using this 4-word build where whatever the bad topic is, maybe it's self-scheduling, I don't know. And you say, okay, everybody gets a list and writes down 4 words on whatever this conflict is. What are the first words that come to your mind? And then you pair them up, and between their 8 words, they pick the 4 top words. And then you keep pairing until the whole group decides on what are the 4 top words that define this. It really helps as a group to move through whatever a conflicted area is and break down a barrier on a unit. There's a lot of others. These are just some examples. I like campfire stories. You can do this at the beginning of a staff meeting. What was your best patient experience this month? What was your worst? What was your best discharge story? What was your worst admission? And you get them talking about the work environment and bring value into what they're doing. And then I've listed some other resources, and I'll be happy to share these slides that can be dispersed out to the group. And you know, again, it's tools in a toolbox. You might not want any of them, you might want a few of them, but there are a lot of resources out there for team building. And so last polling question, what is your take-home message from this presentation? Or what did you get out of this? What will you apply? And no wrong answer here, but I'm just interested to hear. And if it's something other than what I listed, please put it in the chat. I love that. It really does come down to respect, doesn't it? It really does. All right. I love it. It does come down to that. I agree. It comes down to respect, but everybody is different and there has to be some flexibility. So you're right. I feel the same way. Acknowledging a baby boomer's preference to work in teams, organizational leaders can suggest this generation actually form a committee to promote success within the company. Maybe a retention committee, maybe a welcome committee for the newer generations, maybe a committee that looks at how can we start a training program. The technological skills of the millennial nurses can be tapped when you're launching a new system or a new technology on your unit. The Gen Xer strengths are ideal for like clinical practice issues or dealing with quality assurance. They include all of this. This includes balancing personal and professional commitments. So consider things like job sharing, self-scheduling. Nurses just, the millennials might want some assistance in developing a financial portfolio because they're in so much debt. Look at your individual organization and create that culture in which all the generations can thrive. As I mentioned earlier, there's individual flowers that are beautiful, but when you build a multi-generational team, you build a beautiful garden. And like a beautiful garden, it takes intention, nurturing, growth. But the beauty's worth it. It's worth the effort. And that's all I have. Thank you. Any questions?
This is Cassidy. That was just incredible. And I think as evidence from the chat that it was very educational and also very interesting. I don't see any questions other than will it be available for us after the presentation, the slides, the recording? Yes, we will share the slides. We will share a link out to the recorded webinar and make that available to you as soon as it's posted on our website. But we still do have a few more minutes if there are any questions. Yes.
Dr. Weston, that was just absolutely excellent. Thank you so much. One of the things that purely anecdotal, but has been due to the pandemic, the extreme burnout and the lack of communication among nurses to the point that where they feel like they're so isolated and they're, just in their own little bubble of wrapping all day long. And when they get out, they're totally exhausted and, in pain from watching others in pain. What do you think will come out of this in terms of just intergenerational sympathy, empathy for one another, as nurses have really been on the front lines and going through all this? Have you picked up on anything in terms of the literature coming out on how to start to heal things for nurses?
It's just starting, I would say, to hit the literature, but the problem is being identified of huge topics on resilience and recovery after the pandemic. I think that it's nurses, but I think it's everyone. I think it's society. It's all individual people, and I think the extension of grace is huge at this time in the workplace. And then in celebrating for so long, all of these coping mechanisms that we've used to build teams and to feel community have been sort of stripped from us. And as we're emerging from those restrictions, finding those avenues to reconnect, I think, are going to be crucial for fostering that resilience in the nursing workforce.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Feel free to unmute or type into the chat.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from the organizations on anything that you've encountered in your generational differences or strategies that you've had that were successful or that you've thought about.
I don't see anything coming up. Okay, we do have one comment or question, I guess. Do you see any successful recruiting tools for different generations?
So the key thing is casting that vision of meaning and making a difference for the younger generation. And as I mentioned, I think in a rural setting, you have so much inherent just to the delivery of rural healthcare that shows how you make a difference. That's one piece. The younger generations are really wanting to know how they would make a difference, but they also want an organization, and this is where rural organizations sometimes lag. They're very technologically savvy, so they want to know that they're going to have access to modern, our latest, our technology. So really enhancing those areas where, as an organization, you've made those strides will be important to that younger generation, letting them know that how you have stayed innovative in your rural areas will be important in recruiting them, and helping them feel a part of making some of those changes or innovations within an organization will really engage them.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so I guess that is it. Unless anything else comes through, then I will check one last time, but I want to thank you so much for that incredible presentation. And thank you to everyone that attended today. Be checking your inbox for the email that includes the link and the slides that you will be able to download. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you next month, hopefully. Have a great afternoon, everyone.